This video comes from a proposal by Gustavo Torres, who suggested the topic by giving the example of Xcaret in Quintana Roo. This subject allows us to explore how authentic or not what is today presented as pre-Hispanic really is. And well, each case I will mention has its pros and cons. As you'll see, everyone has their own reinterpretation of the past, and not infrequently, those reinterpretations are sold as if they had truly been done that way thousands of years ago. So let's begin by talking about Xcaret. Xcaret is the name of that theme park, an ecotourism center, and a large-scale resort. It is privately owned and located in what is today called the Riviera Maya. In short, Xcaret is basically the Mayan Disneyland, created to profit from both national and foreign tourists. You pay in Mexican pesos or US dollars. There are various packages, with the most expensive being the ones you see here. As part of the shows we had Mayan dances, or the nighttime performance, which included the traditional ball game, the conquest, several historical stages of Mexico, and dances from different regions of the country. And just like Xcaret, in other Mayan regions we see similar phenomena. Cenotes used as swimming pools, or Mayan weddings. Now, while some websites justify these practices by claiming they are not inventions because they are based on the customs of Mayan communities, we must point out that while it's true that certain traditions and customs have survived among native communities, to claim that things like this were done in the same way over 500 years ago, honestly, no. No ancestral Maya community would have used decorations like this to celebrate weddings. As for cenotes, they used to be secret places, even burial sites, where not just anyone was allowed to enter. They were seen as the entrance of the Maya Xibalba, recreating myths such as those of Hunahpu and Ixbalanque. For that reason, there were no ziplines, snorkeling, buffets, or entertainment shows. And well, if, as some websites say, these shows provide a source of income for Mayan communities, then it's fine that native groups protect their environment through tourism. After all, these natural wonders sell themselves. However, the lack of authenticity is evident, since they don't even reflect the obligations or realities of Asian communities. For example, modern Mayan weddings of the equivalent tilma bindings in central Mexico are completely artificial. Back then, these unions were union commitments between communities, unlike today, when none of these weddings have legal validity in Mexico. And of course, none of the supposed priests performing them have any legal authority. So, in the end, they are just shows, only good for photos, nothing more. Another element that isn't Maya can be seen in many costumes, particularly in the feathers they wear. As we see here in Xcaret's dancers, almost all the feathers, if not all, come from birds not native to the continent. In this Xcaret dance, for example, the main character gears feathers from birds introduced by the Spanish, namely the pleasant and the rooster. Also, in this specific dance we hear drums rhythms derived from dances played in Concheria or Mexicanidad ceremonies in central Mexico. In other words, they are not Mayan rhythms. And well, the dancers themselves may not even be real Mayans from nearby areas. Years ago, I personally met dancers who weren't Mayan at all. They were brought in from Mexico City just to stage these shows. Another example of inauthenticity can be seen in the incense burners, which in ancient times weren't shaped like cups. Or the weapons. To make them look pre-Hispanic, they used macuahuitlus, but those weren't common in Mayan regions. And honestly, in some cases, it's just like when James Bond gave Mexico City its Day of the Dead parade a few years ago. A lot of what people today call Mayan comes straight from movies like Apocalypto. Now, regarding the Escared Nighttime show, it's good, but it tells you the classic story of Spaniards versus indigenous peoples. Here, yes, their costumes are closer to those in the codices, but on the other hand, they promoted a simplistic version of history, that there were only two sides, Spaniards versus indigenous, instead of the complex reality of many indigenous groups fighting each other across the continent. On the question of the authenticity of supposedly pre-Hispanic costumes in general, the truth is that very few are based on historical sources. Most of what you see among dances are modern inventions, even their ceremonies. For example, you can spot musical instruments that clearly didn't exist 500 years ago. As I said in another video, sometimes you even see Batman axes or spandex fabric under the costumes, metal seat rattles, feathers from animals that didn't even exist here, strange designs, and countless synthetic or plastic materials. Among conchero dancers, for instance, there's a tendency to use huehuetls, drums, from metal barrels. And interestingly, some dancers even call these pre-Cuauhtemic dances. That's wrong, because to begin with, these dances are not centuries old, and we don't even know what the original rhythms or choreographies look like. To call them pre-Cuauhtémoc dances implies they were already performed before Cuauhtémoc's time, and that's simply a lie. We also find foreign symbols fused with pre-Hispanic ones. One of the most famous examples is this one, where they combine an original design with the Asian yin-yang. And let's not even get into the controversy around dancers asking for donations in public places like Mexico City's Zócalo, beaches, or archaeological sites. Another point worth clarifying involves the so-called ceremonies people do today. Take the classic equinox celebrations. People dress in white, raising their hands to charge themselves with energy, celebrating on the days that don't even align with the actual astronomical event. Yes, we do have solar markers everywhere. But these modern practices had more to do with modern trends than with the past. For starters, very few people were allowed to climb the pyramids back then. They were places reserved for the elite, not the general population, but these current festivities were heavily influenced by the New Age movements, with figures like the late José Argüelles, an American who created his own interpretation of the Mayan calendar. Things like this became fashionable around the so-called end of the world in 2012. Of course, the Mayan calendar didn't end, but it sparked countless modern ceremonies. Just as he offered his modern version of the Mayas, many others created pre-Hispanic yogas, pre-Hispanic martial arts, even Toltec or Quetzalcoatl churches, countless board games, or new ceremonies borrowed from other parts of the continent, such as the pipe ceremony, the sun dance, or ayahuasca ingestion. There are even supposed pre-Hispanic therapies that mix Asian acupuncture, cupping, and other foreign treatments. And perhaps our greatest pride, the Day of the Dead, wasn't celebrated in the same way back then either. Our modern Day of the Dead blends pre-Hispanic traditions with Christianity. Celtic Samain dates November 1st and 2nd, and influence from many other cultures. So, It's true. All these practices are modern reinterpretations, maybe by people today. And all of this is now part of national identity, where we had inspiration from the pre-Hispanic past, but also a mix of countless influence from other cultures across the continent and around the world.